Hello and welcome to the big picture. For any government elected to power with a good majority, first 100 days of its 5-year term is not period enough to make any realistic or objective assessment of its performance. However, since governments nowadays tend to set for itself some targets to achieve during the first 100 days, it has become the norm to have a look at its performance. The 100 days which has been completed today by the Narendra Modi-led NDA government has been quite eventful on many fronts, be it the promises made or the steps taken. While the business and industry generally seems to have welcomed most of the steps taken so far and signals given, some of the problems like inflation continues to be a matter of concern. In this period, there have also been certain foreign policy initiatives which have come for praise while some others have been criticized. There have also been controversies which have kept the government on tenterhooks apart from concerns on the social front. We will look at all this today and discuss if the direction in which the Modi government is headed is generally right, and if not, where does it need course correction? To discuss this, I have with me Rajiv Sikri, former Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, Mohan Guruswamy, Economic and Policy Analyst, Nalin, Kohli, BJP National Spokesperson, Rajiv Kumar, Senior Fellow, Center for Policy Research. Welcome to all of you. Mohan Guruswamy, Mohan, I would like to come to you first as an independent observer. Do you think that the measures taken so far by the government, some of the initiatives taken so far, some of the decisions taken so far have all been in the right direction?
I think it's been a pretty good 100 days, objectively speaking. I would have been happier if we did some of the big things, which they haven't done. They haven't tackled the issue of capital expenditure, the diminishing capital expenditure, which then can create jobs and give the economy a boost. They haven't done some of the, taken the hard decisions as yet. But for the first time in many years, or maybe in 10 years, that we feel like we have a prime minister, that there is a person who's in authority and in power at the same time. It is not divided. And so that itself is a big booster and a big confidence builder. I think the bureaucracy has been responsive to these changes. And I think you see more proactive government, at the lower level, secretary, joint secretary level, things are beginning to move. So I think that is welcomed by industry. But on the other hand, I wouldn't say that, the miracle has been wrought. I think we'll have to wait for that because so far, this government has not shown any initiative to break away from the past. This loaded subsidy regime, this low capital expenditure regime, all that has to change because the country needs to create 12 million jobs a year. And you can only create that by huge investments in infrastructure. But I think on the other hand, by making economic diplomacy the focus of his diplomacy, he's again moved in the right direction, And I think some of his colleagues haven't really caught up with his pace. But I think, give them some more time, give them another 100 days, maybe we will see something.
Nalin, Kohli, everybody he has said all the positive things. Where do you think you need to, do some course corrections? In these 100 days, as a party, do you think there have been any play, can you be honest about it, saying that there are areas where maybe we need some course correction?
Honestly speaking, in 100 days, to even talk of course correction may be a little premature. This is something that could be answered, once you've really gone into government in terms of maybe close to a year. When you'll be able to really assess that whatever decisions have been taken, how is the implementation process going? But however, with the first 100 days, I think the most significant, and one of them Mr. Mohan Guruswamy raised is, the authority is back to where it belongs. There's no duality of authority. It's focused in the government. And it's there in the Prime Minister office and beyond, in the government itself. The second, I think, important thing is the focus is completely on implementation. And I'm just going to highlight one scheme. I can talk of all the other names. But in Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, the fact that, this government early on recognized they need to bring in the scheme, they need to bring in also the urban poor beyond what was conceptualized earlier. And it's announced on 15th August and on 20th August, launched in a bipartisan manner. Prime Minister in Delhi, Chief Ministers across the state, Union Ministers, MPs. 15 million bank accounts, 15 million accident insurance policies on day one. And today, over 22 million. So within a week. I think that shows that implementation is the key focus, and this government the Prime Minister said it up front, that even those who may have been skeptical within the structure, can it be done? That yes, we can. And I think this government needs to work on the big decisions, work in implementing big things in terms of jobs, skills, economy, all of it. So therefore, I think it's a good start from that perspective.
Okay, Rajiv, Kumar, Mohan raised some concerns about this government actually not showing that it has really broken from the past. Would you think that's a matter of concern, or you think that this is just too early for us to make to come to such kind of a conclusion?
Well, I mean, there's no need to break from the past. If you can actually evolve a more coherent and policy and continue to focus on implementation, because that's been one of our weakest suites. And some of us who had believed that Mr. Modi would be like a Reagan Thatcher kind of a figure who will come in and create, sort of big bang reforms. That was a self-afflicted disappointment, I must say, because his track record in Gujarat doesn't show at all that he is that kind of a person. He's a cautious reformer who believes in, taking one step at a time, as the Chinese say, feeling the pebbles and feeling the pebbles under your feet while crossing the river. And therefore, and some hard decisions like the rise in railway fare have been taken after 14 years, and and the FDI in defence that's been hanging fire, FDI, the 100% FDI in railway. So I think there is a clear sign that the past will not hold this new government into breaking out into new areas, and so those are all the good signs, and I think all the good directions. Now, for me, however, there is just one thing that I like to point out, that while focusing on implementation, project execution, etc. is all very well, a complicated, diverse, globalizing economy like India needs certain clear policy articulation and enunciation. And let me give you an example. How would you fight food inflation? Needs a clear enunciation of a policy rather than only administrative measures. And as you have seen, all the administrative measures having been taken, food inflation refuses to come down. So you have to here articulate a policy direction that in the short term and in the medium term, this is how we will improve the supply of non-cereal food grains, which is the only way to bring down food inflation. Now that sort of policy articulation, I'm afraid, will not come about with this sort of, as Mr. Kohli said, with this nearly complete dependence on the existing bureaucracy and the existing, sort of system. It will require a wider consultation and putting your thinking caps on for that. And I think the investor community especially is looking for that policy articulation, because otherwise the current hype that is there in the market, etc., could not be sustained, I'm afraid. So that policy articulation is the area where I'm hoping in the next 100 days the government will find the confidence to take the next necessary steps, tell the people where they want to go in tackling some of the big challenges that are facing the country and the economy.
Okay, we are now joined in by Vandita Mishra, opinion editor of the Indian Express. Welcome, Vandita. I'll come to you. Before that, Mohan, would you like to react to that? What he said? Policy articulation, inflation, food inflation is a problem, is a concern. Though there has been a lot of hype about some prices coming down, but the general situation is not as good as it.
Look, I have a different take on this. I mean, when the economy is growing, when incomes are growing, you can't expect vegetable prices to remain static. Relatively, terms of trade will remain the same. So what Rajiv Kumar and the urban middle class want is that, they want international prices to prevail everywhere else, except when it comes to buying tomatoes. They want, 1964 prices. That's not going to happen. There is no supply side constraint here. There is no production side constraint here. Production is increasing, but consumption is increasing. People are getting wealthy. It's a simple realization of fact. And then, as far as cereals are concerned, if procurement prices goes up, market prices also will go up. So, you can't have it both ways. Now, having said that, all this hype of this growth which is we've been seeing.
I need to clarify this, Mohan.
I'll come to you, Rajiv.
Coming to Walmart will solve
Rajiv, 1 second, I'll come to you. Let Mohan finish.
Okay.
Quickly, Mohan.
Now, the other thing is that what needs to be causes concern is that this growth we had in this first quarter has mostly come from the financial services and from the community spending.
And it is from April to July when the
sector,
UPA government was still in power.
Core sector actually has slid down, and that should cause us concern. You know, manufacturing hasn't kicked off.
We will come to that. We'll come to those details a little later, Mohan. Yeah, very quickly, Rajiv, you want to react to what he said? I have to go to Rajiv Sikri now.
Yeah, you see, because I think because you see what I had pointed out in a recent article was that for food inflation, which is focused on meat, poultry, milk, fruits and vegetables, what you need to do is in the immediate term announce a reduction in your tariff and non-tariff barriers to imports so that the traders and the holders know that there is more competition coming and therefore there will be an economic incentive for them not to do so. And on the other hand, for the longer term, you have to announce measures as to how you will improve the productivity in these sectors and not merely take the steps to keep increasing cereal production, of which you have 60 million tons in stock, and you are exporting 22 million tons at the international prices.
Okay.
So not for a minute am I saying that we don't want international prices to prevail here.
We will have to have
I'm actually saying please use trade to bring down the prices
we will have to have goods. We'll have to have a separate discussion with both you and Mohan here on these issues. Mr. Rajiv Sikri, the larger picture, we're looking at the 100 days. One of the first things which Prime Minister Modi did was on the foreign policy front, even on the day of his swearing in. So, and after that, whatever he has done, though the calling off of foreign secretary level talks with Pakistan has been some kind of a, there has been controversy regarding that. There have been people welcoming it, people criticizing it. But what do you think generally of the overall situation?
Well, I think that for a person who has had in his past experience, limited experience of foreign policy, he's been very deft and sure-footed. One definitely discerns a clarity of thinking, a strategic policy is there. And I'm glad that he has started off by focusing on the immediate neighbors, wanting to make everyone a part of India's growth story, success story, including Pakistan, which is why there was the outreach to Nawaz Sharif. But as you mentioned about the calling off of the foreign secretary level talks, I think there is an equally welcome message to Pakistan that it cannot be business as usual, that I am willing to extend a hand of friendship to you, but there are new red lines, there are rules of the game which you have to observe. The second good thing which I think and of course his visits to Bhutan and Nepal. The second good thing which Mr. Modi has done is to focus on the areas of opportunity, that is East and Southeast Asia, the Act East policy. If you see over the last few weeks and months, all the high-level visits planned and that have taken place have been to this region, whether it is Singapore, Vietnam, Japan.
The visit of
Chinese president is coming. But China is in a slightly different category. And here I think that we still don't know how the two big visits later this month will go. The US visit, the Chinese visit. And while he has had a meeting with President Putin of Russia, again, not enough attention has been given to Russia. I'm not saying it's because there hasn't been any opportunity. But these will be the big things because there are growing tensions between these three big players. Yes. And Mr. Modi will have to handle it.
And Mr. Modi has given some kind of a, in his speech in Japan, he made a very, he made a mention of China and I don't know.
No, he didn't make a mention of China.
He didn't talk of China, but it was.
No. In fact, when he was asked a direct question, he sidestepped it. So I think we have to have good relations with Japan, but at the same time, China is a neighbor and we have to work out an arrangement with them.
Okay. So, generally, it's going in the right direction. Vandita, we have been discussing here about economic policy, foreign policy. Right at the beginning, Mohan Guruswamy says that, after a long time, we feel that there is a Prime Minister in office, not only, with power, but also with authority. How do you look at these 100 days of the Prime Minister and the government?
In general, I think there is a sure-footed government with the authority of a very large mandate. and that shows. But I think I would like to take up from what Mr. Rajiv Kumar was saying. You know, there is a danger of a very successful chief minister governing like a chief minister at the center. So that danger is that to be only an implementer of projects. Now, Mr. Modi, as a chief minister, actually, it is possible to take forward projects to their last stage of implementation, to see them through, to have that kind of a specific and precise and successful follow-through. That may not be possible as Prime Minister, where you have to balance various interests, where you may tread on toes. There are various jurisdictions, there are state chief ministers that you have to carry along and other institutions. So I think what Mr. Modi will have to somewhere take a call on is whether he sees himself as the implementer of projects, or he sees himself in a larger policy making role where you set the broad contours of policy and then take a step back and then delegate. So I think that is something that he still has to finally take a call on.
That's interesting. Mohan, that's an interesting point which he makes. You know,
you see, the difference between
because there's already some kind of a criticism that he micromanages things, and that causes problems and things like that.
You see, the difference between a chief minister and a prime minister. The chief minister's got enormous raw power. You know, he can do things. He can give electricity. He can give water. He can have somebody arrested, locked up, killed, whatever. You know,
all the good and the bad.
Chief ministers do that in abundance. But as prime minister, you don't have any of that. Prime Minister is vested with authority. He's got an office which is like a pulpit. So you sit on it and you preach. You convert people. And this is where he has surprised me. He has made use of that platform very effectively by reaching out to a larger constituency to convert them, to preach, which I think the previous Prime Minister didn't use it at all. I think good Prime Ministers use this, whether it's Indira Gandhi or Vajpayee or whoever, uses this office for. And I think this August 15th speech was superb that way. He reached out to large numbers of people, and he put forward a vision. I think to that extent he has surprised me, and I think he's made the transition from Chief Minister to Prime Minister quite well. But I come back to where Rajiv said that, it's too early to do anything big bang. Time to do major reforms is actually the first budget. If you don't do it, then the second budget you don't really get a chance. Now, the big bang industrial reform thing came in Narasimha Rao's first budget. Manmohan Singh did it, and that was it. That took us off in a different direction. I think they missed the bus on that. That causes me concern. So let us see how they will back out of that. This thing of being sure-footed and feeling the pebbles is all fine. But let's see how many pebbles they're going to feel before they come to the other bank.
Rajiv, yes, you wanted to react?
Yeah. One, I think on this very important point about the Independence Day speech, and wanting to compliment Mr. Modi to have raised a mirror to all of us, especially to the elite, by pointing out to the social evils and the ills and the warts that our society suffers from. Never has it been done from the ramparts of the Red Fort, and I think that was an amazing thing that he did, because he has actually therefore demanded participation from the people, demanded their commitment, and in some sense, bridged the gulf between the ruler and the ruled for the first time. And not by saying that he is the principal sevak, etc. No, that's not the one. But by raising issues which are there for the common person who feels it every day, and bringing it up to that level and making development a participatory process. But the second point that I wanted to make is that, I said about being not sure-footed and about the time for big bang reforms. One, let's be clear, this was not the first budget, this was the interim budget. Second, when the governance is broken, you can announce as many reforms as you like, and you can pass as many bills as you like, which is the food security or the right to education or whatever. But if their governance system is not there to deliver it, these are all on paper. So I think he's taken the stick in the right end by trying to get the governance system put together and put together a better delivery system before announcing any of the reforms that might well come in the first real budget of this government in February 2015.
Okay. Before I go to Nalin, Vandita, would you like to react to what Rajiv Kumar was saying, and also Mohan about the Independence Day speech, first time coming out, talking to the people, addressing a wide variety of people, making certain commitments?
I think that was refreshing because he chose to go outside and to make a direct connect with people, particularly the bits about, how parents need to mind their boys more than they need to mind their girls, the focus on sanitation. These are issues that are traditionally and conventionally not taken up by prime ministers, and it is refreshing that a prime minister should choose to do so. But my earlier point about, how a chief minister is different. The prime minister has to be different in the scope of his own, how he views his own scope, the scope of his own powers and what he can do. I think there, the point I was making was that actually so far, I think Mr. Modi has acted more like the chief minister of India rather than the prime minister of India. I think that's something he needs to look at.
That's interesting. Actually, Nalin Kohli, this is not the first time a prime minister is facing this kind of a situation or this kind of, I won't call it criticism, observation, because the last time we had a chief minister who became a prime minister, he was also called the chief minister, the prime minister of Hassan or Karnataka. So this is the same thing.
That was the term that used to be used.
No, would you agree that
therefore
it takes time for a chief minister to get used to the job of the prime minister?
Not at all. I think I have a few points to make. The first is, anyone who's out there to try and predict Mr. Modi is doing it at their own peril. Because Mr. Modi has
He's unpredictable.
Not about unpredictable. It's about that he doesn't fit into what you are expecting in terms of the standard thing. And that's exactly what the mandate is. It's actually a break from the past. Otherwise, in 67 years, you haven't seen an opposition party ever with a full, clear majority. And of course, we know about the last 30 years. The point is that when Mr. Modi was campaigning, he was portrayed. There was he's a divisive person. India will be under threat. There won't be this large thing. When he came, his first three occasions of speaking, one was the Central Hall of Parliament, Team India, all of it, people saw a different thing of what they were. So you have to see Mr. Modi in new light. If you're going to see it from the old perceptions, you're going to do yourself wrong, not him. Okay. Number one. Number two is about the question of a chief minister mode. I think let's get the fact. There has not been dearth of enunciating policies. The policy paralysis or the paralysis of policies, we know it. What the mandate is clearly is impatience about delivery.
Absolutely.
When there's impatience about delivery, then you need to see that we need to deliver. When we are saying that we are going to judge ourselves for 60 months against 60 years, you need to perform. And performance will happen through the team. It's not going to happen by centralizing it. But you need to hold them accountable.
That is exactly
That's why you need to hold them accountable and you need follow-up.
No, you brought about the issue of centralization. Mohan, Mr. Sikri, before I come to you, Mohan, this issue of centralization is becoming a point of discussion in certain circles about that, whether he is centralizing authority too much. Some people feel that it is necessary. Some people feel that it's not a good thing.
You see, centralization of authority in the Prime Minister's office has been going on for a long time. The Prime Minister sees almost 450 files a day, which he shouldn't be doing. He appoints every bank director. He appoints every head of public sector company all over the country. These are things he shouldn't be doing, getting involved with. But, it's become that way because Prime Ministers concentrated power in their office. Very difficult to divest. The system has got used to it. But I don't think he's micromanaging anything. There's no evidence of that. There's no evidence of, meddling around with small things. I think he's managed to keep that distance. It's also physically not possible. But if people perceive that you have a strong Prime Minister, the difference is in 10 years you're dealing with a strong Prime Minister.
and this is what the people expect him to be.
Yeah, and he has actually not been overbearing. I'm surprised at that,
Mr. Rajiv Sikri, in terms of foreign policy, is this the kind of prime minister which the people should look forward to, which the diplomats would look forward to? That that here is a man who is in complete control. But there is also criticism that he is taking most of the foreign policy decisions. The foreign minister is not really involved.
I think we should understand that in any country, the chief executive is in charge of foreign policy, and it has been the case in India also. So for the Prime Minister to set the policy directive on foreign policy is nothing new. It has been done in the past in India. I think it is a good thing because the world is taking him very seriously, which is why so many countries send special envoys. Many leaders are very keen to engage with him at the earliest opportunity because they see something new, see something different, see a new dynamism, opportunities. And that is the job of the Prime Minister, to restore faith in India. Now his visit to Japan, I mean, the pitch he's making is for the Japanese to come in and invest in India. If he can succeed with Japan, then that would send a signal to the whole world, because the Japanese are among the most difficult conservative investors. So if you can convince Japan, you have convinced maybe 20 other countries. So I think that he's going about it in the right way. There's only one point I'd like to suggest on foreign policy. I think not enough attention has been given to the Gulf region, to West Asia, which is a very troublesome region, and a lot of problems there. And I would like to hope that in the coming months, the Prime Minister and his team will give a little more attention to that.
There was this confusion as far as Israel was concerned, and the
Palestinian
that
is true.
There was a confusion on that issue.
Of course, we did a good job in getting the hostages back, but there's a lot more to be done on policy.
Rajiv Kumar, very quickly, apart from all the economic issues and foreign policy issues which we have discussed, do you think that the social situation in this country can influence, affect, help the general situation in the country, the economic situation in the country? Do you think the social situation which prevailing now should have anything to do with the economic situation?
Mr. Nikam, I actually relate, perhaps because I am an economist, the developments in the social situation directly to what happens in employment. If you don't have employment, if you have a large number of young people who got aspirations, who got some qualifications, but who don't have a decent job to work, they will be cannon fodder to all forms of extremists, fundamentalists, and to those who want to create social disruption. So what I want to say is that in our country, in Lutyens, Delhi, people now should keep awake at night because they should find the question of generating 1 million jobs a month the most daunting and the biggest challenge on earth. And I think that is what Mr. Modi would now be directing his efforts to, because at the end of the day, the social situation, yes, it has all sorts of other, drivers, which might be political or, cynically motivated. But at the end of the day, if you give a young person the decent job that he or she is looking for, then I'm convinced that the social situation will stabilize. If on the other hand, you don't do that, the so-called much wanted demographic dividend could easily turn into a demographic nightmare. So employment, the generation of 12 million jobs a year for the next 15 years is the key to India's social stability, I dare say.
Yes, Mohan, very quickly.
I think, Rajiv's touched a very important point. If you give away 4.5 lakh crores a year as subsidies and tax write-offs, and you actually spend only 1.5 lakh crores on capital investment every year in the budget, then you're in bad trouble.
Okay. Nalin?
Well, I mean, just a quick point. Yes, of course, jobs is a priority, and that's why you're seeing consistently him speaking also about skills, which is about employability. So there's requirement of employment, there's also requirement of employability, which is skills. And I think looking at it in terms of only in terms of figure, that's not the jobs we are aiming for, is when under Atalji there was 60 million jobs plus in a period of about 6 years. The fact is that this has to be judged over a period of time, not literally from month one.
Okay. Vandita, quick last words to you. What are your major concerns in these 100 days?
I think one major concern is this, the message that is sent out by the denial of the LOP position to the Congress. No matter what the rule says, no matter what the law says, I think the BJP has taken a very, very restrictive interpretation of whatever rules and laws exist. And I think that there is a lack of deference and respect to the institution of the opposition, which also actually resonates in the slogan of Congress Mukt Bharat. You need an opposition party, you need a healthy opposition party, in fact, to keep the government on its toes. And as a responsible government, you need to defer to the institution of the opposition, not necessarily to the party of the opposition. So I think that, to me, is a very worrying, very, very worrying move.
Okay, I think on that note, we have run out of time. On that note, we'll need to end. There have been mostly this panel feels that mostly things are looking positive, but apart from some concerns here and there. There are, of course, concerns on the social front, which has been expressed by many people. We'll have to wait and watch. These are election season. The unfortunate thing in India is that in every few months, we keep having, at least every year, we keep having elections, and political parties are on election mode most of the year. Hope that the central government will keep above the election mode and look at its job in a focused manner. Thanks to all my guests, Nalin, Kohli, Mohan, Guruswamy, Rajiv, Sikri, Rajiv, Kumar and Vandita, Mishra. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue in Big Picture same time tomorrow.